Betwixt young Pallas and his aged sire, the Trojan passed the city to survey, and pleasing talk beguiled the tedious way. The stranger cast around his curious eyes, new objects viewing still with new surprise. With greedy joy inquires of various things, and acts and monuments of ancient kings. Then thus the founder of the Roman towers: these woods were first the seat of sylvan powers, of nymphs and fauns and savage men who took their birth from trunks of trees and stubborn oak. Nor laws they knew, nor manners, nor the care of labouring oxen or the shining shear, nor arts of gain, nor what they gained to spare. They exercised the chase, the running flood, supplied their thirst, the trees supplied their food. Then Saturn came, who fled the power of Jove, robbed of his realms and banished from above. The men dispersed on hills to towns he brought, and laws ordained and civil customs taught. And Latium called the land where safe he lay from his unduteous son and his usurping sway. With his mild empire, peace and plenty came, and hence the golden times derived their name. A more degenerate and discolored age succeeded this, with avarice and rage. The Ausonians then and bold Sicanians came, and Saturn's empire often changed the name. Then kings, gigantic Tibrus and the rest, would arbitrary sway the land oppressed. For Tiber's flood was a Bula before, till from the tyrant's fate his name it bore. I last arrived, driven from my native home, by fortune's power and fate's resistless doom. Long tossed on seas I sought this happy land, warned by my mother nymph and called by heaven's command. Thus walking on he spoke and shewed the gate, since called Cormental by the Roman state, where stood an altar sacred to the name of old Carmenta, the prophetic dame, who to her son foretold the Aenean race, sublime in fame and Rome's imperial place. Then shews the forest which in after times fears Romulus for perpetrated crimes, a sacred refuge made, with this the shrine, where Pan below the rock had rites divine. Then tells of Orcus' death, his murdered guest, whose grave and tomb his innocence attest. Thence to the steep Torpian rock he leads, now roofed with gold, then thatched with homely reeds. A reverent fear, such superstition reigns among the rude, even that then possessed the swains. Some god they knew, what god they could not tell, did there amidst the sacred horror dwell. The Arcadians thought him Jove, and said they saw the mighty thunder with majestic awe, who took his shield and dealt his bolts around, and scattered tempest on the teeming ground. Then saw two heaps of ruins once they stood, two stately towns on either side the flood. Saturnia and Janicula's remains, and either place the founder's name retains. Discoursing thus together they resort, where poor Evander kept his country court. They viewed the ground of Rome's litigious hall, once oxen load were now the lawyer's ball. Then stooping through the narrow gate they pressed, when thus the king bespoke his Trojan guest. Mean as it is, this palace and this door received Alcides, then a conqueror. Dare to be poor, accept our homely food, which feasted him and emulate a god. Then underneath a lonely roof he led the weary prince and laid him on the bed. The stuffing leaves with hides of bears overspread. Now night had shed her silver dews around, and with her sable wings embraced the ground. When love's fair goddess, anxious for her son, new tumults rising and new wars begun, couched with her husband in his golden bed, with these alluring words invokes his aid, and that her pleasing speech his mind may move, inspires each accent with the charms of love. While cruel fate conspired with Grecian powers to level with the ground the Trojan towers, I asked not aid the unhappy to restore, nor did the succor of thy skill implore, nor urged the labors of my lord in vain, a sinking empire longer to sustain. Though much I owe to Priam's house, and more, the dangers of Aeneas did deplore. But now, by Jove's command and fate's decree, his race is doomed to reign in Italy. With humble suit I beg thy needful word, O still propitious power that rules my heart. A mother kneels a suppliant for her son. By Thetis and Aurora thou wert won, to forge impenetrable shields and grace, with faded arms a less illustrious race. Behold what haughty nations are combined against the relics of the Phrygian kind, with fire and sword my people to destroy, and conquer Venus twice in conquering Troy. She said, and straight her arms of snowy hue about her unresolving husband threw. Her soft embraces soon infused desire, his bones and marrow sudden warmth inspire, and all the Godhead feels the wonted fire. Not half so swift the rattling thunder flies, or forky lightnings flash along the skies. The goddess, proud of her successful wiles, and conscious of her form, in secret smiles. Then thus the power, obnoxious to her charms, panting and half dissolving in her arms. Why seek you reasons for so just a course, or your own beauties or my love distrust. Long since had you required my helpful hand, the artificer and art you might command, to labor arms for Troy, nor Jove nor fate confined their empire to so short a date. And if you now desire new wars to wage, my skill I promise, and my pains engage. Whatever melting metals can conspire, of breathing bellows or the forming fire, is freely yours. Your anxious fears remove, and think no task is difficult to love. Trembling he spoke, and eager of her charms, he snatched the willing goddess to his arms, till in her lap infused he lay possessed of full desire and sunk to pleasing rest. Now when the night her middle race had rolled, and his first slumber had refreshed the god, the time when early housewives leave the bed, when living embers on the earth they spread, supply the lamp and call the maids to rise, with yawning mouths and with half-opened eyes. They ply the distaff by the winking light, and to their daily labor add the night. Thus frugally they earn their children's bread, and uncorrupted keep the nuptial bed. Not less concerned, nor at a later hour, rose from his downy couch the forging power. Sacred to Vulcan's name an isle there lay, betwixt Sicilia's coasts and Liparae, raised high on smoking rocks, and deep below, in hollow caves, the fires of Aetna glow. The Cyclops hear the heavy hammers deal, loud strokes and hissings of tormented steel, are heard around the boiling waters roar, and smoky flames through fuming funnels soar. He through the father of the fire by night, through the brown air precipitates his flight. On their eternal anvils here he found the brethren beating, and the blows go round. A load of pointless thunder now there lies before their hands to ripen for the skies. These darts for angry Jove they daily cast, consumed on mortals with prodigious waste. 3 rays of rhythm rain, of fire 3 more, of winged southern winds and cloudy storm. As many ports the dreadful mixture frame, and fears are added and avenging flame. Inferior ministers for Morse repair his broken axle trees and blunted war, and send him forth again with furbished arms, to wake the lazy hall with trumpets' loud alarms. The rest refresh the scaly snakes that fold, the shield of Pallas and renew their gold. Full on the crest the Gorgon's hat they place, with eyes that roll in death and with distorted face. My sons, said Vulcan, set your tasks aside. Your strength and master skill must now be tried. Arms for a hero forge, arms that require your force, your speed, and all your foaming fire. He said. They set their former work aside, and their new toils with eager haste divide. A flood of molten silver, brass, and gold, and deadly steel in the large furnace rolled. Of this their artful hands a shield prepare, alone sufficient to sustain the war. 7 orbs within a spacious round they close, one stirs the fire and one the bellows blows. The hissing steel is in the smithy drowned, the grot wood beaten anvils groans around. By turns their arms advance in equal time, by turns their hands descend and hammers chime. They turn the glowing mass with crooked tongues, the fiery work proceeds with rustic songs. While, at the Lemnian god's command, they urge their labors thus and ply the Aeolian forge. The cheerful morn salutes Evanthus' eyes, and songs of chirping birds invite to rise. He leaves his lowly bed, his buskins meet, above his ankles sandal sheets his feet. He sets his trusty sword upon his side, and over his shoulder throws a panther's hide. 2 menial dogs before their master pressed. Thus clad and girded thus he seeks the kingly guest. Mindful of promised aid he mends his pace, but meets Æneid in the middle space. Young Pallas did her father's steps attend, and true Achates waited on his friend. They joined their hands, a secret seat they choose. The Acadian first their former talk renews. Undaunted prince, I never can believe the Trojan Empire lost while you survive. Command the assistance of a faithful friend, but feeble are the succors I can send. On Arrow Kingdom here the Tiber bounds, that other side the Latian state surrounds. Insults are wars and wastes are fruitful grounds. But mighty nations I prepare to join their arms with yours and aid your just design. You come as by your better genius set, and fortune seems to favor your intent. Not far from hence there stands a hilly town, of ancient building and of high renown, torn from the Tuscans by the Lydian race, who gave the name of Caere to the place. Once Aegilina called, it flourished long, in pride of wealth and warlike people strong, till cursed Messentius in a fatal hour assumed the crown with arbitrary power. What words can paint those execrable times, the subjects' sufferings and the tyrant's crimes? That blood, those murders, O ye gods, replace on his own head and on his empire's race. The living and the dead at his command were coupled face to face and hand to hand, till choked with stench in loathed embraces tied, the lingering wretches pinned away and died. Thus plunged in ills and meditating more, the people's patience tired no longer bore the raging monster, but with arms beset his house, and vengeance and destruction threat. They fire his palace while the flame ascends, they force his courts and execute his friends. He cleaves the crowd and favored by the night, to Turnus' friendly court directs his flight. By just revenge the Tuscans set on fire, with arms their king to punishment require. Their numerous troops now mustered on the strand, my counsel should submit to your command. Their navy swarms upon the coast, they cry, to hoist their anchors, but the gods deny. An ancient augur, skilled in future fate, with these foreboding words restrained their hate. Ye brave in arms, ye Lydian blood, the flower of Tuscan youth and choice of all their power, whom just revenge against Messentius arms, to seek your tyrant's death by lawful arms. Know this, no native of our land may lead this powerful people, seek a foreign head. Awed with these words, in camps they still abide, and wait with longing looks their promised guide. Tarchon, the Tuscan chief, to me has sent their crown and every regal ornament. The people join their own with his desire, and all my conduct as their king require. But the chill blood that creeps within my veins, and age and listless limbs unfit for pains, and a soul conscious of its own decay, have forced me to refuse imperial sway. My Pallas were more fit to mount the throne, and should, but he's a Sabine mother's son, and half a native, but in you combine a manly vigor and a foreign line, where fate and smiling fortune shew the way, pursue the ready path to sovereign sway. The staff of my declining days, my son, shall make your good or ill success his own. In fighting fields from you shall learn to dare, and serve the hot apprenticeship of war. Your matchless courage and your conduct view, and early shall begin to admire and copy you. Besides 200 horse he shall command, though few, a warlike and well-chosen band. These in my name are listed, and my son, as many more, has added in his own. Scarce had he said, Achates and his guest, with downcast eyes their silent grief expressed, who, short of succors and in deep despair, shook at the dismal prospect of the war. But his bright mother from a breaking cloud, to cheer her issue thundered thrice aloud. Thrice forky lightning flashed along the sky, and Tyrrhene trumpets thrice were heard on high. Then, gazing up, repeating peals they hear, and in a heaven serene refulgent arms appear, reddening the skies and glittering all around. The tempered metals clash and yield a silver sound. The rest stood trembling, struck with awe divine. Aeneas only, conscious to the sign, presaged the event and joyful viewed above the accomplished promise of the Queen of Love. Then to the Arcadian king, this prodigy, dismiss your fear, belongs alone to me. Heaven calls me to the war, the expected sign is given of promised aid and arms divine. My goddess mother, whose indulgent care foresaw the dangers of the growing war, this omen gave when bright Vulcanian arms, faded from force of steel by Stygian charms, suspended shone on high. She then foreshowed approaching fights and fields to float in blood. Turnus shall dearly pay for fate forsworn, and corpse and swords and shields on Tiber borne shall choke his flood. Now sound the loud alarms, and Latian troops prepare your perjured arms. He said, and, rising from his homely throne, the solemn rites of Hercules begun, and on his altars waked the sleeping fires, then cheerful to his household gods retires. There offers chosen sheep, the Arcadian king and Trojan youth the same oblations bring. Next of his men and ships he makes review, draws out the best and ablest of the crew. Down with the falling stream the refuse run, to raise with joyful news his drooping son. Steeds are prepared to mount the Trojan band, who wait their leader to the Tyrrhene land. As brightly courser, fairer than the rest, the king himself presents his royal guest. A lion's hide his back and limbs enfold, precious with studded work and paws of gold. Fame through the little city spreads aloud, the intended march amid the fearful crowd. The matrons beat their breasts, dissolve in tears, and double their devotion in their fears. The war at hand appears with more affright, and rises every moment to the sight. Then old Eventer with a close embrace strained his departing friend, and tears overflow his face. Would heaven, said he, my strength and youth recall, such as I was beneath Praeneste's war. Then when I make the foremost foes retire, and set whole heaps of conquered shields on fire, when Herelus in single fight I slew, whom with 3 lives Feronia did endue, and thrice I sent him to the Stygian shore, till the last ebbing soul returned no more. Such if I stood renewed not these alarms, nor death should rend me from my palace arms, nor proud Mezentius thus unpunished boast his rapes and murders on the Tuscan coast. Ye gods and mighty Jove, in pity bring relief and hear a father and a king. If fate and you reserve these eyes to see my son return with peace and victory, if the loved boy shall bless his father's sight, if we shall meet again with more delight, then draw my life in length, let me sustain, in hopes of his embrace, the worst of pain. But if your heart decrees which, oh, I dread, have doomed to death his undeserving head, this, oh, this very moment let me die, while hopes and fears in equal balance lie, while, yet possessed of all his youthful charms, I strain him close within these aged arms. Before that fatal news my soul shall wound, he said, and swooning sunk upon the ground. His servants bore him off and softly laid his languid limbs upon his homely bed. The horsemen march, the gates are opened wide, Aeneas at their head, Achates by his side. Next these the Trojan leaders rode along, last followed in the rear the Arcadian throng. Young Pallas shone conspicuous over the rest, gilded his arms, embroidered was his vest. So from the seas exerts his radiant head, the star by whom the lights of heaven are led. Shakes from his rosy locks the dearly dews, dispels the darkness and the day renews. The trembling wives the walls and turrets crowd, and follow with their eyes the dusty cloud, which winds dispersed by fits and shew from fore, the blaze of arms and shields and shining war. The troops drawn up in beautiful array, over heathy plains pursue the ready way. Repeated peals of shouts are heard around, the neighing coursers answer to the sound, and shake with horny hoofs the solid ground. A greenwood shade, for long religion known, stands by the streams that wash the Tuscan town, encompassed round with gloomy hills above, which add a holy horror to the grove. The first inhabitants of Grecian blood, that sacred forest to Silvanus vowed, the guardian of their flocks and fields, and pay their due devotions on his annual day. Not far from hence along the riverside, in tents secure the Tuscan troops abide, by Tarchon led, now from a rising ground, Æneid cast his wondering eyes around, and all the Tyrrhene army had in sight, stretched on the spacious plain from left to right. Thither his warlike train the Trojan led, refreshed his men and wearied horses fed. Meantime the mother goddess, crowned with charms, breaks through the clouds and brings the fated arms. Within a winding vale she finds her son, on the cool river banks retired alone. She shows her heavenly form without disguise, and gives herself to his desiring eyes. Behold, she said, performed in every port, my promise made and Vulcan labored o'er. Now seek, secure the Latian enemy, and hawk to Turnus to the field defy, she said. And having first her son embraced, the radiant arms beneath an oak she placed. Proud of the gift he rolled his greedy sight around the work and gazed with vast delight. He lifts, he turns, he poises, and admires the crested helm that vomits radiant fires. His hands the fatal sword and corslet hold, one keen with tempered steel, one stiff with gold. Both ample, flaming both, and beamy bright, so shines a cloud when edged with adverse light. He shakes the pointed spear and longs to try the plated cushions on his manly thigh, but most admires the shield's mysterious mold and Roman triumphs rising on the gold. For these embossed the heavenly smith had wrought, not in the rules of future fate untaught, the wars in order and the race divine of warriors issuing from the Julian line. The cave of Mars was dressed with mossy greens, there by the wolf were laid the martial twins. Intrepid on her swelling docks they hung, the foster dam lolled out her fawning tongue. They sucked secure while, bending back her head, she licked their tender limbs and formed them as they fed. Not far from thence New Rome appears with games projected for the rape of Sabine dames. The pit resounds with shrieks, a war succeeds, for breach of public faith and unexampled deeds. Here for revenge the Sabine troops contend, the Romans there with the arms the prey defend. Wearied with tedious war at length they cease, and both the kings and kingdoms plight the peace. The friendly chiefs before Jove's altar stand, both armed with each a torture in his hand. A fatted soul for sacrifice is led, with imprecations on the perjured head. Near this the traitor Meges stretched between, 4 fiery steeds is dragged along the green. By Tullus' stone the branches drink his blood, and his torn limbs are left the vulture's food. There Porsena to Rome proud Torquil brings, and would by force restore the banished kings. One tyrant for his fellow tyrant fights, the Roman youth assert their native rights. Before the town the Tuscan army lies, to win by famine or by fraud surprise. Their king, half threatening, half disdaining, stood, while Cocles broke the bridge and stemmed the flood. The captive maids dare tempt the raging tide, 'scape from their chains with Cloelia for their guide. High on a rock heroic Manlius stood, to guard the temple and the temple's god. Then Rome was poor, and there you might behold the palace thatched with straw, now roofed with gold. The silver goose before the shining gate there flew, and by her cackle saved the state. She told the Gauls approach, the approaching Gauls, obscure a night ascend and seize the walls. The gold dissembled well their yellow hair, and golden chains on their white necks they wear. Gold o'er their vests, long alpine spears they wield, and their left arm sustains a length of shield. Hard by the leaping Salian priest advance, and naked through the streets the mad Luperci dance. In caps of wool the torches drop from heaven. Here modest matrons in soft litters driven, to pay their vows in solemn pomp appear, and odorous gums in their chaste hands they bear. Far hence removed the Stygian seats or seen, pains of the damned and punished Catiline. Hung on a rock the traitor, and around the Furies hissing from the nether ground. Apart from these the happy souls he draws, and Cato's Holy Ghost dispensing laws. Betwixt the quarters flows a golden sea, but foaming surges there in silver play. The dancing dolphins with their tails divide the glittering waves and cut the precious tide. Amid the main two mighty fleets engage, their brazen beaks opposed with equal rage. Actium surveys the well-disputed prize, Leucades' watery plain with foamy billows fries. Young Caesar on the stern in armor bright, here leads the Romans and their gods to fight. His beamy temples shoot their flames afar, and over his head is hung the Julian store. Agrippa seconds him with prosperous gales, and with propitious gods his foes assails. An able crown that binds his manly brows, the happy fortune of the fight foreshows. Ranged on the line of post, Antonius brings barbarian aids and troops of eastern kings. The Arabians near and Bactrians from afar, of tongues discordant and a mingled war, and rich in gaudy robes amidst the strife, his ill fate follows him, the Egyptian wife. Moving they fight with oars and forky prows. The froth is gathered and the water glows. It seems as if the Cyclades again were rooted up and jostled in the main, or floating mountains meet. Such is the fierce encounter of the fleet. Fireballs are thrown and pointed javelins fly. The fields of Neptune take a purple dye. The queen herself amidst the loud alarms, with cymbals tossed her fainting soldier warms. Fool as she was, who had not yet divined her cruel fate, nor saw the snakes behind. Her country gods, the monsters of the sky, great Neptune, Pallas, and Love's queen defy. The dark Anubis balks, but balks in vain, no longer dares oppose the ethereal train. Mars in the middle of the shining shield is graved and strides along the liquid field. The Dire souse from heaven with swift descent, and discord, dyed in blood with Gorman's rent, divides the priest, her steps Bellona threats, and shakes her iron rod above their heads. This scene Apollo, from his Actian height, pours down his arrows, at whose winged flight the trembling Indians and Egyptians yield, and soft Sabaeans quit the watery field. The fatal mistress hoists her silken sails, and, shrinking from the fight, invokes the gales. Aghast she looks, and heaves her breast for breath, panting and pale with fear of future death. The Godhead figured her as driven along by winds and waves and scudding through the throng. Just opposite sat Nilus, opens wide his arms and ample bosom to the tide, and spread his mantle over the winding coast, in which he wraps his queen and hides the flying host. The victor to the gods his thanks expressed, and Rome, triumphant, with his presence blessed. 300 temples in the town he placed, with spoils and altars every temple graced. 3 shining nights and 3 succeeding days, the fields resound with shouts, the streets with praise, the domes with songs, the theaters with plays. All altars flame, before each altar lies, drenched in his gore the destined sacrifice. Great Caesar sits sublime upon his throne, before Apollo's porch of Parian stone, accepts the presents vowed for victory, and hangs the monumental crowns on high. Vast crowds of vanquished nations march along, various in arms and habit and in tongue. Here Mulciber assigns the proper place for Carians and the ungirthed Numidian race, then ranks the Thracians in the second row, with Scythians expert in the dart and bow. And here the tamed Euphrates humbly glides, and there the Rhine submits her swelling tides. And proud Araxes, whom no bridge could bind, the Danes' unconquered offspring march behind. And Moeni, the last of humankind, kind. These figures on the shield divinely wrought, by Vulcan labored and by Venus brought, with joy and wonder fill the hero's thought. Unknown the names, he yet admires the grace, and bears aloft the fame and fortune of his race.